Welcome back, everyone. So today's video, we are going to be going over Hexical. Now, it may sound similar to Hexhole, but they're different. They are, I promise you that. Now, this video is going to be long. You can see there's a lot, but it has some great spells. There may be one or two in here that I'm like, I have no clue. Actually, no, I think there's only one, but yeah. This is gonna be a big video that has a lot of cool stuff, so let's hop into it. So this video, instead of starting off with patterns or something, I'm gonna actually start off with items. So one of the first items you're gonna see is the Grimoire, which, if you look, is kind of similar to the spellbook. I'm actually gonna show you. In here, I'm gonna go to the items. I'm gonna find the Grimoire so I can show you it in there, because Grimoire has a couple of patterns associated with it. The basic of the Grimoire, though, is basically it's like a book that inside of it you put a spell and it echoes throughout itself, thus repeating the spell infinitely, allowing you to associate that spell to a pattern, and every time you cast that pattern, it'll throw out that spell for you with ease. So it's pretty good. Yeah, and apparently you can introduce up to 512 patterns, so not that bad. So let's say I want to introduce a spell to it. I have to have a pattern as the key, the password to the list, and the list as in the spell. And then, yeah. And I can also erase the Grimoire, or I can even get what list of patterns is in it. Yeah. So let's say I want to make a spell off of this, because it's a nice convenient spell. And now let's say I want to launch me up a little bit. And then bam. So now what I have to do is basically do this. And like so, I've ran into the Grimoire. Now if I write that pattern, I believe it should then launch me up as if that pattern is a real pattern that actually the nature itself has introduced. But no, I just kind of mimicked it. And you can also hover over it to see what it is bound to. I can see that it's bound to that pattern, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And like I said, I could erase the pattern, or I could even get the list of patterns out of it, like so. So I can see, no, yeah, so it shows, okay, right, I forgot. It doesn't give you the list of the spell, but essentially you're allowed to write multiple different patterns into it. So let's say I want one that's gonna throw me down instead, because that's always more fun. So now, me, then -y, and then impulse, bam. And now I can also write this to the Grimoire, and then bam. And now let's say I want to be up in the air a little bit, then I draw that pattern. It throws me down a little bit. Yeah, so it's very nice, and you may notice that just erasing it normally doesn't work. That's why it has to have its own specialized pattern. So let's say I want to get the list of patterns from it. So I'm just gonna do that. And I want to get rid of both. So I could do something simple as this, where I have it so it takes out one and then casts this to erase that pattern from the Grimoire. I have to double check. Yep. Nope, that's wrong. There we go. Erase from Grimoire. And then, bam, that's all I should need. Now I just... I made a mistake. Hold on. Ooh. I did that wrong. Okay, That's what I meant to do, and now I can do the proper thing that I was trying to do. Then get rid of that. Then I can do this. And then I can do Thoth's Gambit. And then it's erased, and you can now see there's nothing that the Grimoire is bound to, which is very cool. Now, there is another thing that is similar to it called the Scarab Beetle. Now, the Scarab Beetle has two modes, non-active and then active. So it's pretty useful. And I'm pretty sure even if you scroll to a different hand, it'll still stay active, which is pretty cool. But basically, the Scarab Beetle works a little differently, and it more tries to detect illegal patterns per se, which are patterns that are not recognized by nature and will usually be nonsense patterns. And basically, you can teach it a pattern by using Scribe's Gambit, but you cannot learn what you taught it with Scribe's Reflection. Doesn't work, because the Scarab is actually alive. Yes, it's technically alive in a way, which is a little weird, but yeah. So I just need to teach it any spell. So let's say just a normal spell that'll throw me in any direction at like twice the looking vector. And then close it up and write down with Scribe's Reflection. Now, the Scarab Beetle has a spell. It'll proudly show that it's been trained to cast that spell. Now, if I do something that would normally be a nonsense, it'll write it into the list and will cast that spell. Now, if I throw it onto the ground, I actually don't know if this will work because I haven't done it like this before. Yeah, but it has to be within your inventory. Oh, that was actually a spell, but yeah. It would much rather cast the spell that, you gave it than let the stack have a miss sense, which is very useful. Now, this next item is a animated scroll, which is actually kind of cool. Yeah, so animated scroll is kind of normal, but oh, that's not what I wanted. But it does some cool things. So if I go into the thing that shows the animated scroll, it can contain multiple patterns to my knowledge. Yeah, I could... Yeah, I can put in a list of pattern IOs. So let's say I want to make a list of break block spell, because that's a simple spell that everyone should know, because it's one of the most basic spells you're gonna learn. And then just like so, I have that. Now I should be able to write into the scroll and accepts it. Now it's going to switch in between all those patterns one by one, and you can see it also wibbles as if you drew it, which is kind of cool. Now it also has a couple of its own special little things that you can cast upon it. So let's look at them. So restore scroll restores the parchment to its unmodified state. Now this exists in case if you messed with it and you put it in a state that you don't want. Now this spell I kind of like because in my world I can't access ancient scrolls because I have a couple mods that basically make great spells not work as great spells, because I just automatically am enlightened and can use them from the start. But normally in HexCasting you'd have ancient scrolls that look kind of yellowed and stuff. I don't have that. So I kind of like this because this allows me to basically get ancient scrolls in a way. So I basically just get the animated scroll, and then I cast this. And then, bam. It looks like an ancient scroll now, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and there's also a vanish scroll, so I can make it look invisible. So if I select it again, then I actually probably should also double it so I don't lose it. and I can make the scroll vanish. Need to make sure that I don't write it wrong though. Now, this scroll looks like it doesn't even exist. It looks like it's not there, which is kind of cool. Now, I can also dye the ink. Now, we'll get in... Oh, wait, nah, hold on. So, RGB. So, let's say I want to make it red. So, I should be able to get the scroll entity. And the thing is, it's going to take RGB colors. So, red, green, and blue. So, usually that's in like amounts of 225 or so. I haven't used RGB in a while, but essentially RGB is how your screen works to display certain colors. It puts in a mixture of red, green, and blue and gets any color you want. And you can use this with vectors because it's just 3 numbers and get any color you want. So let's say I want to make it red. So I have 1 in R for red, just to make it red, because simple. And I'm making sure that I draw it right, because the thing is, the version of this mod I cannot identify. I tried, and it just doesn't seem to exist, because it says it's 2.0, but it's not. It's a little weird. If y'all can figure out which version this is, I would love it if you did. Because I've been trying. I can't figure it out. But yeah, there. You can make it dyed, and also you can illuminate the ink. So, I think this is the last one of its patterns. Yep. So I can just draw it down. Like so. And illuminate the ink, which means it should glow, but it kind of already was glowing. But yeah, it's a nice little thing, and you can see that it's also modified in here. But yeah, it's a cool little thing. Yeah, so that was the animated scroll, which I actually should erase. But yeah. So it's useful if you want to show a list of patterns or have it so you can modify your patterns a little bit more. Now this is the casting carpet. The casting carpet at first glance doesn't seem all that much, but it's actually kind of big and important, because the thing is, if I step onto it, okay, you can see my grid is this size. If I step onto it, it grows. You can see it shrink out. It grows because I'm on the casting carpet. It'll automatically grow your casting grid as if you have another scrying lens on. Even if you already have one on, it'll still give you that effect, which is pretty good. Now, the hex candle is another little thing that will light off of basically the color that you have as your pigment. At least I believe that's the case. Yep, it'll light off the color of your pigment. Yeah, so that's the color of my pigment, and it'll automatically light as that. And if I crouch, it extinguishes it. And if I light it again, it'll still be the color of my pigment. It all is based off of who lights it, which is pretty cool. Now this media jar, I actually forgot to go over before I showed. So we're going to go through this together. So, media jar. I can melt down all my amethyst in this little jar. Unfortunately, the glass is too thin for me to draw media through, or thick. Although I have right, I remember this thing now, but basically it gives you a whole bunch of crafting recipes based off amethyst dust to do stuff like turning a thought knot back into normal string, or string into a thought knot, which is pretty cool. Or even transforming coal to charcoal and other cool things. Yeah, I actually completely forgot I could do that, because I actually never messed with it in survival. But yeah, it can be pretty useful. Now, this is the media log, or the error log. The thing is, I've been trying to get this thing to work. I tested with it before I made this video. I can't figure it out. Essentially what it's supposed to do is essentially show you the error you made that made the whole spell fail. It's supposed to show me that, but it's not. I don't know how to make it work. I don't. So, unfortunately, I can't show you much of what that does. Now, the lail, I can actually show you, because it basically functions as... Wait, where is it? There's the lail. Basically, it takes 2 periwinkle, which I'll go over soon, but the lail basically acts as a slightly lesser form of scrying lens, but it can also increase your casting range even if it's with a low scrying lens. You can only have 1 scrying lens on you, but you can combine it with a lail to get the effect moreover. I just have a mod that adds low face slot, so I use the face slot for my scrying lens, which I'm pretty sure that mod is called Trinkets. Yeah, anyways, so now going on to periwinkle. Periwinkle is kind of like a soothing flower, and in the book it describes it as a flower that was commonly used with ancient hexcasters, because this mod has to deal with like ancient ways of ancient hexcasters. But yeah, it was used to basically just calm them down and just basically let them relax for a little bit. Now, unfortunately, it's gone extinct, but there's a spell that you can use on a sniffer to actually make a sniffer start digging and look for periwinkle. So it's in the sniffer loot table, which is quite cool. And it has all sorts of other cool effects. But yeah, it's pretty cool. You can make a couple of potions with it, which I'll go over shortly after I go over this plushie. Now, this plushie is in a set where this is just the normal hexy one, but you also have thoths, you have irises, you have quaxi, which is a little funny joke based off of a HexCasting addon that switches the casting grid from being hexagonal to being square. Kind of funny. This one also is just a messed up one, and this one you can tell is based off Mind Flay. Yeah, all sorts of cool little things. They don't really do much, but ancient hexcasters like them just because they're a little cute, and also they help distract you from the horrors of hexcasting, because hexcasting is like an ancient horror when you think about it. Yeah, but anyways, these are the 2 potions you can make with periwinkle. They're called Potion of Wool Eyes, and basically you have to add periwinkle to an awkward potion, and you can use glowstone and redstone to increase the time or like strengthen the effect, like with most potions. I actually never craft potions, so I've never used these in survival, but the basics on how these work is basically they each have a good effect for you. Basically, they allow you to like soften your mind, so then you don't remember the horrors of hexcasting. Basically, you could essentially do stuff like remove your ability temporarily to cast great spells, or even just take a break from hexcasting away. So let's say I drink this. Now I have Wool Eyes. I can still open up the casting grid, but I'm pretty sure if I try to cast a great spell, it'll give me the error of you can't do that. Oh, I was wrong. Hold on. Yeah, but I know one of them allows you to take away that ability. Okay, so basically in normal hex casting, once you become enlightened, or once you try to cast a great spell and fail, essentially you can trade off your own life to try to cast a spell if you don't have media. Wool Eyes 1 basically removes that ability. You cannot trade your own life to cast spells. It removes it for the set amount of time. Now you could use Wool Eyes 2, which is strengthened and thus completely removes your ability to cast great spells. And then, like so. Hold on. My stuff doesn't like to work. I know it should be removed. Let me find a normal great spell. Create lava. Good. So I'm just going to get this position right at my feet. And it may actually have stopped working because of just the spells I have. Well, in normal hex casting, it's supposed to revoke your ability to actually cast any great spells. But in my case, it's broken, so I can't quite show you because I have so many mods that it just turns great spells into normal spells, which is kind of sad in my opinion. But yeah, it's kind of useful. Now this is a sentinel bed. They are pretty useful. Now a sentinel bed is like a cozy little comforting bed that the sentinel gets to go into. So let's say I place one. Why do I want it sideways? There we go. So I can just basically put my sentinel inside of it, like so. And so you know how a normal sentinel doesn't have a bit range around it. So that means it has to be within 32 blocks of me if I want to cast something on it, unless it's a spell that doesn't require a bit range, which for most spells like break block is not the case. They require it to be within your bit. But with how the little sentinel works with the sentinel bed, it should actually allow me to just simply go and use it even if it's not within my bit range. So let's say I want to break that block. It worked because within a sentinel bed, a sentinel gets its own little bit range within the bed, which is kind of useful. Now, I don't know how far that bit range extends outwards, but it works and it's pretty cool. So if you give me a second, I now need to get rid of my sentinel. And there we go. Now, these are Krutos. I probably am saying that wrong, but basically they're special little things. These don't really have much of a design, so some of them have little uses. Yeah, you can do that with the flute and the bell. You can ring. Yeah, so, but most of them, like the clover, you can hear me right clicking, it doesn't really do anything. And you may see the compass, it's going all over the place. What are these for? They're actually for a spell that I will go over later, and that spell is called, it's a great spell, and it's called Charm. Charm acts like taking any item and then turning it into a... I need to think of how to explain this. It basically turns it into a spell focus, getting rid of the original function of the item, but now it can contain a spell, and you can give it two lists. One list for when you're standing, one list for when you're crouching. And I'll go more what those two lists are about and other things. But yeah, Krutos are pretty cool. I'm actually going to keep them in my inventory so I can show you what they can do later. So now we're going to go on to the pedestal. I'm back. I had a little issue there that wasn't really good. I lost a couple of items there, which isn't all the best. Essentially what happened is I tried to place down a pedestal. I've learned there's an issue with my mod pack and pedestals. Pedestals crash my game, so I can't really show you what they do, but essentially I can at least show you in the Hex notebook what they're supposed to do. So let me find a pedestal. Pedestal can do some cool things with spell circles, but also it can hold an item for you and allow you to also read out that item as if it was an item frame and you're checking like the item inside of it. But I can read out an IOT from whatever it's holding, or in a spell circle case, I could even have it so it acts like an offhand or a main hand to the spell circle, allowing me to do more things with spell circles. Now, unfortunately, in my mod, it's broken. It crashed my game. So, I had to restart the recording a little bit. So, yeah. Be careful if you use my mod pack, it breaks it. Which, speaking of, my mod pack is posted to GitHub. It should be in my community posts. The link to it should be in my community posts, so check that out if you want. But now on to the last two items I'm going to cover, which are in their own special little category in my version of the Hexical mod, or Hexical. So basically, there's genie lamps and then arch genie lamps, or hand lamps and arch genie lamps. I will go over both. So hand lamps are pretty simple. Now, this basic wish spell is in between both genie lamps. Basically, the wish spell can put a list of patterns, aka a spell, into a genie lamp. And basically, by using it, the genie inside learns that spell, and since it's so bored because it has nothing else to do, it will cast that spell for you when you use the lamp. Now, the thing is, just saying it casts the spell is a understatement. It will cast that spell every tick, aka 20 times a second. Now, yes, you could do that somewhat with Hexical, but that is still expensive. This is just the genie casting for you every single second with a single item, which is kind of crazy. So, let's say with this, I want to fly. All I have to do is just simply, and then I can go, bam. Now, wish, like I said, is basically the only way to get in this spell, and it will basically teach the genie. So, we're going to write wish. So I need to do this, that, and just have a big circle, which then will lead into that. Bam. And now, like so, the genie has learned it, and I can hold down right click, and it will cast that spell for me every 20th of a second, which, as you can see, is a lot. Yeah. Now, the arch genie lamp is a little different. If you just tap right click, you can see it turn purple. If I on right click, then it turns back to normal. Now, the normal genie lamp, I have to hold it down for the spell to work. This arch genie lamp, no, I just right click it. If it's purple, it's on and will be casting for you 24/7 until it runs out, or it is not able to cast, which also, these wool-eye potions are not supposed to be in my inventory. Okay, so now let's say I want to put in a new spell. And it's going to be the same spell, but this time, because I don't want to fly into the moon, I'm going to turn it down a bit. So I'm going to divide it, because I don't want to fly too far. Bam. So now, I have a little spell. And just like the normal one, I have to use Wish, which will basically install the spell into it by teaching the genie. And bam. Now see, I'm not even holding right click, but it will continuously cast for me 24/7 until I click again to turn it off. Now, normal genie lamps have a couple of spells unique to them. It pushes the original position of when I began the hand lamp, and then pushes the original rotation when I started using the hand lamp, pushes the original velocity when I began using the hand lamp, and all sorts of cool little things. Yeah, just for the hand lamp. Yeah. Now, the Arch Genie lamp has other patterns specifically for the arch genie lamp, which usually can do a little bit more. I haven't actually used any of them, but I also believe they can only be cast by the person inside the little lamp. Now, there's also a couple of spells that you may need to know. And also, I should go over how to get these genie lamps. So, an Archmage genie lamp, you have to use a spell and basically steal the mind of a villager and put it into a normal hand genie lamp. And then you'll get a Archmage genie lamp. And also, they have their own reservoir of amethyst, or media, I should say, that they pull from. They can't pull from your inventory. They are not able to. But yeah, so to get a normal hand lamp, you need to find a wandering trader, and usually it's about half a stack worth of emeralds. So kind of expensive. Also, not too bad of a deal. But yeah, so to refill a genie lamp, you need to use this spell with some amount of amethyst dust, and it'll put that into the genie lamp and refill it for you, which is pretty good. This is promote lamp. It is how you promote a lamp from a hand lamp to a arch genie lamp. And basically requires an entity, which, like I said, I believe is a villager. And you just cast it while that entity is in your stack. Then bam, you have a arch genie. Pretty cool. But yeah, that's all I really have on genies for you. Now, let's get into basic patterns. So let me pull up my little thing, because I don't have all these remembered. But this first part is over pattern manipulation. Let me double check that. Pattern manipulation, here it is. And essentially, this has to deal with changing patterns and also seeing if they're the same or similar. You can see congruency and similarity. Yeah, these are pretty useful. And these can basically give you a pattern and list of numbers signifying how you drew it. So let's say I make a little thing like this. So basically going forward like this counts as a 1. So this is 1, that would be 1, that would be 1. That, if it was a list signifying how I drew that pattern, it would be 3 1s in a row. Now let's say I want to go down. That is a 2. If I want to go that way, that's a 3. Then I have a 4, a 5, a 6, then back to a 1. And then back to a 2. Yeah. So that's how that works. And it also has another pattern that basically turns a list of numbers and turns it into a pattern, which is pretty cool. So, yeah. And then you have this spell, which can take a pattern and turn it into a list of vectors, which will be important for later, but basically just signifies the order of each point and also where it would be positioned if it was like coordinates from 0, 0, 0, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so let's say I actually want to do this, because this spell basically will take a pattern and then rearrange it to fit in any situation, or not situation, but it'll rearrange it into a form that could not be written by hand. So let's say I put in a number 2, just because I want to put in a number 2. Sorry, I had a little thing there. So now basically what I'm going to do is cast the pattern. And like so. Now I have a new little list. Now this could not be written by hand. Yes, it looks the same. But now if I try to use a congruency, it will not give me true. So just because I don't want to lose this, I'm going to duplicate the top two. Now I'm going to do the congruency pattern. So it takes two and sees if they're the same shape and the same stroke order. Similarity just sees if they're the same shape. It doesn't care about stroke order though. That it doesn't care about. So now let's do this. And bam. Which is odd. I don't know why it showed that. That's true. Let me double check if I actually wrote similarity. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Because that wasn't supposed to do that. Let me try doing number 4. And then trying it again. Okay. Now I can see it is most definitely different. So let's copy it again. Yeah, probably why I didn't actually change it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that congruency pattern again. False. There we go. Yeah. I was just a little confused on how to actually make it work. But yeah. So, pretty useful. Now, these spells I already showed you. Congruency and similarity. Similarity will check if it's the same shape, but not stroke order. This one will check to see if it's same shape and stroke order. So, yeah. Useful if you just want to see if it's just the same shape. It wouldn't matter if this been cast on it. It would still tell true if they're the same shape, which is useful. This one will say no if it's the same pattern, but just manipulated by this. So, yeah, pretty cool. Now, these two, like I said before, this one will take a pattern and then give you a list of numbers. So, let's basically do Hermes Gambit again, because it's always a little good example. So now I'm going to draw it out, and gives me a list of numbers. You can see it starts off with 2, then it goes to 4, 5, then it goes off to 3, and believe, yep, that's 3, then it goes off to 2, then 1. So yeah, that weighs 1, that weighs 2, that weighs 3, that weighs 4, that weighs 5, that weighs 6. No, 6. There we go. So yeah, pretty useful. So always keep that in mind. But yeah, and this one will just take that very same list and turn it back into a pattern. Pretty neat. And this one, like I said, so basically let's use Hermes Gambit again. And like so. It would give me a list of vectors. And it will treat those vectors as if it basically is writing out that off of coordinates based off of 0, 0, 0. And I will show you more what this is used for later. But it does have its uses. And you can see that right there would be that right there, the middle of the pattern. So that coordinate right there is that. That right there is that coordinate. And it goes on. It's pretty useful. Now, going on to the next one, which is grok. Yeah, grok, I don't really understand it all the most. I partially understand it, but also part of it I don't understand. It's just 2 spells. One that will basically take your casting, your whole stack, and basically it's supposed to take a unfinished list building after a unclosed introspection, which I can't figure out how to do. If y'all want to try figure it out, go right ahead. But basically, one list is supposed to be the stack, and the other list is supposed to be the unfinished, unclosed list. The list of what you are building when you cast it. So let's say I want to basically do this, and I want to make a pattern, which is just break block. If I were to cast Hermes Gambit, it would break the block. But let's say I want to save it for later and then make it 2 lists, so I can give it to someone else and allow them to basically have my stack and mess with it. There we go. I kept my stack, but now it's 2 lists. The top one, like I said, is supposed to be an unfinished list that was unclosed and building. I didn't know how to do that, so I can't show you how to do that. And then also it'll have the second list, which was all the IOTs within my stack, which is kind of cool. Now, this one, basically, it kind of does the inverse of Grok's reflection, and instead will take all that and then put it within your stack, allowing you to continue off that spell. Pretty cool. It'll basically reset your stack and put everything that was in it as those items, which is pretty cool. And like I said, I can't figure out how to make that second list work, like the list with the unclosed introspection. I don't know how to do that. But yeah, if it refers to any specific entity or player and you give it to someone else, it will become null when they try to use it. Yeah. So, that's something. Now, these are telepathy. Telepathy are a little weird. Oh, called telepathy. I actually kind of got rid of that. So, hold on. If you give me a second, because I don't remember if I ever kept that. Okay, so now I should be able to call telepathy. If I cast this, I actually don't know how the call telepathy works, because I never really messed with the telepathy stuff much. But yeah, I actually think I understand now. So if I, whoa. I see the issue. So unfortunately, due to one of my add-ons called like HexCasting, it allows me to basically type in the name of any spell I want and get it. So if I want like gates opening, I could do that. But since I now have this, then let's say I want to put it into a spellbook. So basically, I'm going to write in that pattern into my spellbook and have it tell me how many seconds I've been intending to call telepathy or something. This is the way that I have to do it, I believe. So now if I hold G, yeah, so now it'll tell me in ticks how long I've been intending to do that. Now I believe these actually work the same way. So basically this will take any IOT and display it on screen for me right above my hotbar. Pretty cool. Now let's just change it to a shape, because that's funner. Now this one basically does the same thing, but instead of just nice and kindly telling me right above my hotbar, it shouts it out in my face. So let's say instead I just make it normally me, and then I cast it again. it shouts it out in my face. Like it's like, get over here, something like that. It shouts it out. Yeah, now these two, oh, I actually forgot two patterns. Yeah, so basically these two patterns basically create a auditory hallucination. So essentially, this one will create a little ping noise like you picked up XP, and then this one creates like a click. So if I cast them, you can hear a little click only in my head. Yeah, a little advancement that doesn't exist because it's only in my head. Now, if I do this one, it creates a little click, like as if I activated redstone or something. Yeah, it's something pretty cool. Doesn't really do much. And also, these spells you can't cast on anyone else. At least in my version of the mod, there's in the 2.0 full version, you're supposed to be able to. I just don't have those patterns. I don't know why. But yeah. And these two will check how long I've been intending to hit something or interact with something. And just like this, I'm guessing they're kind of broken, requiring me to put into a item to use. So let's just do that. So if I write it out like so, and then have it call it out, and then if I do it again, just because it makes it easier for me. Oh, started getting confused there. There we go. And then, like so, I have it revealed, and I put it in. Now what you should do, yeah. And obviously, since I'm right-clicking with this, it's gonna have the right-click one always go up. But then I can hold left-click and start to make the other one go up. Kind of cool. Yeah. So these ones are similar, but instead of being right-click or left-click or right-click, it is movement. So going forward, going backward, going left, going right. So if I write it just like before, but if I do it something like this, so I can have it all be written down, or not written down, but showed, so I can show you what it does. And just like so, it's all written. And I can put it down into my little spell book, and thus it'll tell me if I'm intending to go in a certain direction or not, which is pretty cool. And like you can see, if I'm not intending to do something, it will just put it as -1. Now these two basically will get if I'm intending to sneak, I believe. Yeah, if I'm intending to sneak or intending to jump. Yeah, and then the last one will just tell if I'm intending to scroll. So let's throw them all together just because I need to show you how every spell works, just to make sure that y'all understand, because I don't want any of y'all getting confused, because Lord knows I've been confused too many times with all this. And now with this, oh, and just like so, then bam. Now I write it down like so. I put it in to the spell book. Then bam. So if I am crouching, it shows me I'm crouching. If I'm jumping, it shows me I'm jumping. Now it can. Yeah, I don't really know how to show that I'm scrolling with it. Yeah, that's one thing that I don't know how to show you. You'd need something else to do that for you. Yeah, but they are useful for telling if you're trying to do a certain action. So, yeah, pretty cool. Now, these next spells are acoustic utility patterns that have to do with acoustic libraries. But the cool thing about these is they kind of work for the individual acoustic not records, but libraries, the acoustic bookshelves. So I'm just gonna create a very specific, though small, because who doesn't like small? A little small library. So now this one will basically, I will get any specific, I'll get the pattern for any specific bookshelf that I choose. So let's say I want to put in a spell, and it is going to be, I don't know, me, because I am just that way. I also forgot to put in a key, so let me just put in upside down me, rotate the 2, and let me also find acoustic libraries so I can put it in correctly. Okay. Yep, so now there it is. So I can exit and go back to acoustic utilities. And I can get the vector of that location, just like so. And now by drawing it, I will get its pattern. I'll get its key. Now, I can also see right next to it that it shows what it has within it. But yeah, I can get its key, how to draw its pattern, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and then this one will take a vector and then get the IOT from inside, which is pretty cool. So yeah. Now these next two basically will take the book itself and put it in. So let's say I want to select this one in particular, and like so I have its position. Let's give it upside down me again because I like it. Now let's do a little spell that will say me, because that's what I feel like doing. Now I'm basically gonna take this and I'm gonna take this spell and write it. So just like so, if I can remember it. Okay. And it writes it into that acoustic bookshelf. And I can also clear a acoustic bookshelf from any distance just by getting its position, or at least from some distance, at least more than usual. And just like so, I can clear it, which is pretty cool. Now I can't read it without like the acoustic record, so remember that you can't use these as a substitute normally to get the spell. You can't, not usually. But yeah, they're pretty useful. And to my knowledge, if I double check, that should be all the patterns to my count. So give me a second to double check. And yep, those are all the patterns. So now we go on to spells. So these spells are, you may notice them similar to, if I can find it, Conjure Block. But Mage Block is a little different. So let's just get my foot position because it's easy. And you can see that it's kind of the inverse of Conjure Block, because Conjure Block's like this. We are doing Mage Block. And it's kind of invisible, like it's very easy to lose track of it. Now, these next patterns are kind of manipulations of Conjure Block or Conjure Mage Block to change it. Now, this first one, I have no clue how to get to work. I've tried using it, but I just don't know. I can't figure out what it does. Basically, you have to cast it onto a Mage Block, and it basically quote-unquote resets it, but the thing is, yeah, it doesn't really reset it. So basically, as if, let me show you, if I basically get that position again and double it just because, actually, I'm supposed to keep it, and I cast this, which will make it bouncy. If I cast it just like so, now it's bouncy. I can bounce on it as if it's a slime block. Pretty useful. Now you may say, oh, well, obviously that little spell called reset is supposed to get rid of that effect, right? Well, at least in all the testing that I did before recording, it didn't. It just straight up didn't do that. You can see it still bounces. So I have no clue what is wrong with reset mage block. Yeah, it says I can create a city out of nothing, or I can cover it in volcanic rock. That makes no sense. I don't know how that relates to the mage block. I can't really tell you. Now, this one is called energized. I can basically make it give off a redstone signal. Basically, a vector and a number. The number is how strong the redstone signal is, which is obviously in between 0 and 15. Yeah. And then I have this other one called ephemeral, which basically allows me to put a duration, which after that duration ends, the mage block will spontaneously just disappear. So, yeah, pretty cool. Now this one, basically, it makes the block volatile, which means if I break it, then all other blocks connected to it, all other mage blocks connected to it, which also are volatile, will break with it. It'll break groups of them quite easily. So, yeah, mage block is just a more customizable version of conjure block. So, yeah, pretty cool. Yeah. So, yeah, now moving on to these. These are rotation. Essentially, rotation, you can start with a vector. So let's say I want this. I want to switch you because I am insane. And and I want to move it out to face X. So it's facing out that way instead of that way. So what I can do is cast this spell, which will then rotate it to be in that pattern, or that direction. And then just like so, bam, it rotates the block. And it isn't a one-time thing. You can also move it back. All it requires is just you to get the position again and get the direction. Which, it has to be axis directions. You can't just go look up and then have it be slightly off in the X and Z and expect it to work. It has to be pure axis directions. You can see that I am failing to pronounce some words. Yep, but bam. So now it's back. Now this one is rotate entity. Basically, you give it a entity and a number, which will then be your pitch, and basically, essentially your up and down, I believe, or it could be your left and right, or no, it's your left and right, and then you have your yaw, which is your up and down. So that's what the two numbers are. But the thing is, it's measured in radians, or however you pronounce them. So I actually don't know about radians all that much. I wish it was in degrees, but essentially, if I give myself, then let's say I give myself 45. Because 45 in rads apparently seems to be as in degrees. So hold on. So like so. And then if I give it, I don't know, 90. I'm hoping 90 works, but I have no clue if 90 will work. And then I try casting it. It should rotate me in a direction according to those in radians. Now, like I said, I don't know how radians work, so I don't know how to tell you. I am sorry, but yeah, it can rotate entities, but I can't tell you all that much about it. Now, this next section is called autograph. It can essentially allow you to put your own signature onto a book or something, or in some cases, remove it. So let's get into it. So basically, I'm pretty sure I can just, cast it just like so, without giving it anything. And it'll take what's in my offhand and sign it. Yeah, it's autographed by me. And if I do not approve of it, I can remove it. So I can remove myself from the book. Now I can also tell if it's been autographed. Oh, wait. Yeah, so it needs a stack of entities. Yeah, so it just checks if a given entity has signed the given item, which is kind of cool. So, wrong book. So if I throw it onto the ground, and then I get its position, okay, and then get myself, it should tell me if I've signed it or not, which I don't know if it counts me currently being signed or having signed it ever before. Huh. Yeah. I thought I knew how this spell worked, but apparently it's either not working or I'm just mistaken. Yeah, I think it has to be a full stack of something. But, oh well. Yeah, you can check if something's been signed. So, these next two should be dies. And dies are kind of simple. So, essentially, it will check if a block can be died, and at the same time, what it is died if it has been died. So, essentially, if I give it a vector, like grass or something, so you know how grass cannot be colored. Essentially, since that's the case, it will give me null, as in, yeah, this can't be colored. So like so, it'll give me null. But if I go and grab some wool, let's do white and blue. Or not blue, green. And then I get the position of this white. Technically, it's uncolored. I'm also going to double it just for reasons. So now, what it should give me is uncolored. Yeah, it should just give me white, because it's white, uncolored. And oh, mind you, this doesn't work on glass. It will not work on glass. You can't get the color of glass. It just doesn't work. But now, if I rotate it and get the position of that green, which is 1 over to the X, and then I get its color, I have lime. But now what if I want to color one of them? I can by basically drawing that same little spell, but in reverse. It'll take a vector or an entity and then a dye color. So let's say I want to turn that one green. So basically, just like so, I can cast it and turn it green. And I can take this one, but yeah, you get the vision. I can dye things and do all sorts of cool stuff. Now, this is a spell that'll take that dye and turn it into RGB colors, which is pretty cool. So let's say I get purple, because purple is purple. Purple is cool. So let's say I get it, and I take its color, because I'm a color thief. There. And now I try to cast the spell to tell what color it is, so I can use that color. And then, bam. It'll give me it in little percentages of how much of each color, as in little that. I believe you can also use this in tandem with the animated scrolls. Yeah, it does some cool stuff. Now, this next one is kind of a unique little spell. It's called Magic Missile. Yeah, so it takes 2 vectors and then it will cast. So the first vector is where it casts from, but it doesn't take world coordinates like with a ray cast or something. It takes offsets from your head. So let's say I want to cast 1x away from my head. There we go. And then I want to cast out in that direction. The direction is going to be normal and the same. And then I can cast Magic Missile and shoots off a little missile. Now, once again, like normal, how strong and how fast it shoots out is based off of how big the vector is, the direction vector. At least I believe so. So yeah, it's a nice little 1-part spell, but it doesn't really do all that much. Now, this next one is Pigment Manipulation. And you may know them as what changes your the color of your spells, but yeah. So basically you can use a die/entity and then get a pigment from it. So let's say I want purple, because purple is purple. And purple is just a nice little thing. And I can get out its pigment, or its color, pretty easily. Just like so. Now I can just do this and have nothing, because I forgot it's not supposed to be vector. Yeah. Every once in a while you're gonna mess up a little spell, you're gonna forget a part. Okay. So now I do this, and now I do this. And then with that, then I can get purple pigment, which is kind of cool. Then I have one that can basically get the pigment at a location and just get the RGB representation of it, which is pretty cool. And then you have Initialize Pigment 2, which basically allows me to initialize a pigment layout as my new pigment color. Yeah, so that one will just take a pigment, a vector, and a number, and it will give you a vector, I believe. Okay, samples a pigment at a certain place and time as a vector where each component is from 0 to 1 and represents the RGB respectively. Yeah, this one I actually don't know that much about, but yeah, it seems like it just gives you the normal RGB colors. But now Initialize Pigment 2, like I was saying, you cast it, and you get to change your spell color. And yeah, now it's dark purple, which I kind of like. Now, going on to the next spell, which is a little confusing because it doesn't really seem like much, because the only real description it has is do magic, which is kind of funny. But essentially, it does little small things, mostly stuff like messing with physical things. So let's say I want to open a oak fence. I can get its position, and then just like so, I can move off a little bit and then cast it, just like so. Oh, wrong. There we go. And it manipulated it. It's a cool little thing. Yeah, it doesn't really do all that much, though. It has a list of what all it can do. It can mess with some things, but it still doesn't really do all that much. Yeah. So, it is kind of cool, though. Now, on to the next part, which is Wrist Pocket. Wrist Pocket, you may look at and go, Okay, what is that supposed to be? So essentially, if I put this in my offhand and then I cast wrist pocket, it hides it in a little pocket. You can see it's not in my inventory. But you may go, well, where is it? It's now in a place called my wrist pocket. So I can tell what's in my wrist pocket just like so. And yeah, it'll tell me the amount of it that I have. But basically, to bring it back, I just have to cast wrist pocket again. And I have it. Kind of cool. Now, wrist pocket isn't limited to just what's in your right hand. There's also sleight or something. Essentially, you can give it a item entity or a vector, and it will perform a sleight of hand and steal the item or the items into your wrist pocket, which is kind of cool. Now, I don't know if that means I could just steal a block. It would be funny if I can. So let me real quick test that. Now, this may actually fail, but I'm curious to see if it'll just let me steal a block. So just like with the wrist pocket, I do this, but then I do this. And you can see it failed. It'll take all things within that spot, but not the block itself, I believe. Which is kind of sad, but also just how it works. Yeah, it does some cool stuff. Now, there's also two little cool things that you can do with wrist pocket. There's Mage Hand, which allows you to interact with something at a location with what's in your wrist pocket. So let's say I put a lighter within my wrist pocket. So, or flint and steel. Don't know why I refer to it as a lighter. But bam. Now if I basically get a position like here, and if I then use Mage Hand, it'll either fail because it's not in the best position to do that, or it will work. So if I just give it a little bit more room, Mage Hand, and it can use what's in my wrist pocket and do cool stuff. Now, there's also another side to wrist pocket. If I put in a stack of golden apples, and also if you want to exchange what's in your wrist pocket for another thing, you can just do wrist pocket. It'll switch out the two items. Pretty cool. You can have up to a stack in there, but then I can use Mage Mouth, which will then eat what's in there. So, and now I can double check to see if it ate all of it or just one. It ate none because I'm in creative. But yeah, it'll just eat what's in my wrist pocket, which is kind of useful. Yeah. So, you kind of want to use your wrist pocket a little bit if you want to keep an eye on things. Or not keep an eye on things, but just have a little extra space to hold stuff. Now, this next one is called spec. A spec is kind of unique in a way. So let's say I want to make an eye out of the spec. And then I give it a position, my head, then I move back, and then I want to give it the position of -X. So it will be facing towards me. Then I cast spec. It will now draw out that in space from that one position. Now, you can also see it's kind of infinitely thin. It's like paper. I line up just right and it disappears. You can still see a slight line, but now it's completely gone because I'm facing it directly. Kind of cool. And it can do other things. Like, I can also move it. So let's say I want to get the spec entity, which is still in my stack. Because I don't want to lose it, I'm just going to duplicate it. Now I can give it a new vector, let's say at my new head position right here. And then I can cast move spec. And then it'll move to that location. Pretty cool. And I can also rotate the spec. So let's say I want it to face out that way instead. I'm going to duplicate it again. And then make it face -Z, I presume? No, positive Z. Positive Z. Positive Z. And then cast rotate spec. and it rotates. Pretty cool. And I can also do roll spec, which will do a number in between 0 and 1, represents a fraction of a full rotation. So let's say I want to flip it upside down. I can do that with a little simple number 1.5. Not 1, 0.5. 0.5. That's what I wanted. Yes, and then I can cast roll spec. And then it rolled the spec upside down. Kind of cool. Now, I want to see if rolling it 1.5 again will roll it upright or not. So let's check that. Nope, it will treat it as from the upright angle. So let's say 0. So it's back to normal. So 0. And then I do rotate spec. It's back to normal. Pretty cool. Yeah. Now I have this other one which allows me to alter a spec. So let me duplicate it again. And let's say I want to, instead of having that in there, I want to have me. Because not even just stuck to patterns, it can be any IOT I want. And I can then change it to be me. Yeah. And I can also set a timer for how long I want it to exist before it disappears. I can also alter its size. And yeah. Yeah, and 0 represents its default. 10 represents the biggest it can be. So let's say I want to double its size. Let me make sure that I don't disappear it. So let's say, yeah, I'm going to 2 to see if that works. And alter scale is that. Yeah, I can make it bigger. And then I can also do all sorts of other cool things. Let me move the spec again, because I want the spec to stay with me. Almost made a mistake there. Move spec. Now it's back to me. And I also have one that can thicken the spec, make it thicker. So let's say I want to make it as thick as possible, so it doesn't just be paper thin. So I give it the spec entity and a number. Let's do 10 like it showed. This should make it half a block thick. Oh, did it more just... Hold on. Oh, of a pattern spec. So hold on. I need to erase and re-get it because my stack, or my screen was a little full there. Hold on. Game spec positions can be a little finicky at times. You have to go for the middle. There we go. Now I have the spec. Okay, I'm going to change it back to spec itself. And then alter it back to be spec. And you can see the thickness that it has now. That is too much. I can also paint the spec so it's a different pigment, which is kind of cool. But if I want to get rid of a spec, I can just get rid of it. And if I want to do a zone distillation or zone spec like, I can give it a vector, a number, and then do that. So it does a zone. There is no position one, just only a zone. And there's no non-zone as well. Okay. So now if I want to if I want to get rid of the spec, I'm just going to look at it and then simply get it into my stack. Then using that, I will write out dismiss spec, and then it's gone. Pretty simple, pretty cool. Now these spells are basic Hexical spells. Yeah, and there's this one called confetti, which I actually like a lot. Basically, you give it a position, and then let's say I give it a number in this case. Let's say 1/2, because I like that. Now essentially, it will cause a little firework-like noise and also make a little explosion of, as you guessed, confetti. And how far it shoots out is based off the number, or you could, instead of giving it a number, you could give it a direction, like let's say positive Y. Now let's say I want to also dim it down a bit, so I'm going to times it by that. There we go, so it's less, so it doesn't shoot up as far. And now if I start drawing spec, or not spec, but confetti, it shoots up confetti. And how far it shoots up is obviously based off of how strong the vector is. But yeah, it's a cool little spell. Now this one is called Vibrate. And I know some of y'all may be thinking weird, but no, all Vibrate does is basically you give it a starting location, then a entity or a vector, and then a number for how long it'll last. It can only go up to 10 for like 10 seconds. So let's say I give it here, and then I give it over here. So it's going to go there. Now, what it does is essentially creates a little air vibration that is visible. It doesn't really do anything other than that, but it can be kind of cool. And then, yeah, you can see a little air vibration that goes through the air. And it just flies through until it reaches its point and then kind of disappears. It also disappears at the 10-second mark. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Now this one is Sparkle. You give it a starting place, then you give it a vector, then you give it a number. That vector basically is RGB, because RGB is pretty useful. So let's say I give it here. And now let's say I want to make it green, because green is cool. Then I want it to be around for like 10 seconds. Then I cast it like so. It creates a little green sparkle that stays there for like 10 seconds. And it is pretty cool. Now this next one is called Crack Device. Crack Device will take a unprogrammed device and try putting a program into it. Program as in, like, or not put in a program, but it basically will make it so in, just like the Scarab, it will proudly show, or just show a lot more readily, what spell it holds, allowing you to see it a lot easier. Yeah, so it's a pretty useful spell. So let's say I want to make a focus, just like so. Now let's say first I want to crack the device, so it's a little easier to see what's inside. I can do it like so by doing this. And then, hold on. It has to be a casting device, so it can't be anything that holds an IO. It has to be something like a cipher or so. So let me go back and actually grab a cipher. Okay, with this it should work. So now with this, because normally, as you know, they don't really show their spell. Yeah, they don't. I think if I go with advanced tooltips, it still doesn't show its spell, which can be a little annoying. So this spell actually exists to allow it to be shown. So thus you can see what's in your little thing. Crack device. Now it will also, once I put in a spell to it, show what's in it. So let's say I have a whole bunch of media right there, and I just so happen to put it in, and I'm putting a spell that you all should be familiar with. Scribe's Reflection, Hermes Gambit, the classic duo. Then close it, and then do Craft Cipher. There we go. And now it will also show me what the hex is instead of not doing that. So it's actually kind of useful. Now this next one is Conjure Flowers. I can conjure up flowers at a position and an identifier. Now just like the special raycast, I don't know all the identifiers, so I can't really show you it. But basically, to get a identifier, you have to at least have the flower. So once you get a flower once, then you can conjure up again and again. So yeah, it's kind of useful. Now this one is called Illuminate. I can give it a vector and then create light at that position with any given number. So let's say 10. I know it can go up to 15, but I'm just choosing 10 in this case. So I need to go like so. And then once I have done that, it's Illuminate, and it creates a light source at that location. And I believe if I pull out a light source too, I could also be able to see it. Yeah, it puts out a 10 light source block. Pretty cool. Yeah. Now, I don't know how about to get rid of it, except for just putting a 0 light source block there. But, yeah, kind of cool. Now, this one basically will take your oxygen and replenish it. So, let's say I have me into the stack, and then I put replenish oxygen, aka gasp. Let's say I go into survival mode. Then I go underwater and I start to drown. It can take a little bit, but yeah, I'm slowly running out of oxygen. Okay, I'm doing fine. I'm a little low. I'm a little worried, but no problem. For I have gasp, which will refill my oxygen, thus allowing me to do stuff, which is pretty cool. Now this one I like a lot. It's called Squawk. It basically allows you to give it a vector, then a identifier to basically create a sound at that location. So let's say me at my location, and then I'm actually going to try something. I think an identifier could just be like it as a entity. So let's go back as a, yeah, and let me just get the sheep. I always put it as a list first because, see, it moved. If I would have just tried to write it there, then I would have had to restart. So now I need to hold still at least for a second. And then I need to be able to write it quick enough. Like so. I have sheep. Now, I think this should work, but I'm also testing because I haven't really messed with identifiers before. So now, with this, I should be able... yeah, it requires a identifier. I don't know what to say. Identifiers I don't really work with. So, yeah, it just requires an identifier. But as you can guess here, it's going hiss. Like a creeper. You can use this spell to pull pranks and stuff. You can create sounds like a creeper about to explode. So, have fun with that. But yeah, I don't know how to make it work. But this next part is projectiles. Now, it says that usually nature would making these out of pure media expensive and non-practical. But, in this case, it makes these kind of cheap. Now, essentially, all these do is give they take a vector and conjure that entity at that location. They don't throw that entity. They don't. They do not. They only conjure it, you have to manually find a way to throw it. So in this case, it would have to be something like I conjure it at my head, and let's say conjure egg, because egg is just a nice little thing to conjure. Okay, and then I use that to get this, and then I do impulse to throw it in that direction. And because I don't want it to run out so quickly, I'm going to do that, multiply it, then do that, then bam, I can cast it repeatedly. So now I can throw eggs with a simple little spell. Yeah, it's nice and cool. And also, you have stuff like conjure spit. You can also conjure a snowball. You can also make a fireball. So, yeah, pretty cool. Which also, there is magic missile, which is similar, but it's also a little different. So, it's not within projectiles. Now, the next one is specialized block breaking, I believe. Yep, specialized block breaking. So, these two I actually use a lot. Basically, it is fortune and silk touch. So I can, let's say I bring out some type of ore. Let's say gold ore. Let's say I have both normal and deep slate. Just because why not? So with this, I'm going to write one spell that's basically going to use fortune. And essentially, it requires two things: a vector and a number. The number is for how strong the fortune will be. It can go up to fortune 2. So let's say number 2 here, because why not? And then let's do fortune break. So I do it like so. Then I create this, then that. Then I have extract block. And then I close it. And then I double it because I'm casting it twice. And then I cast it once, and you can see I got 2 gold from that. And I can cast it again, and I can get somewhere in between 1 to 3. So, not too bad. Now the next one, basically, we're only going to give it to position. But this time, it only needs the vector, because it will just kind of do our stuff for us. So we draw it like so. Then we have collect block. And with collect block, we can close it, copy it. And then if I were to use normal block here, it would just break it as if I broke it with a normal pickaxe. But now, since I've done this, it's a enchanted pickaxe. So it can do silk touch, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so these are very nice to know. Now, this next part is called Conjure Delectables, or delights, I should say. They're like little food that you can eat that also some can do some cool stuff. Now, this normal one is a hex gummy. If I just give it a position, like my head there, and then I cast Conjure Hex Gummy, it'll conjure a little hex gummy. And now I have a little hex gummy. I can eat it. It doesn't do anything to my stack. Now, if I were to do this, which is conjure hex burst, it will take 2 things: a vector where it spawns, and any, as in any IOT, which then it will put into my stack at that location. So basically, I can just take a position and then throw the pattern into the stack, the pattern of me. And then it will conjure a hex burst at that location. Except I messed it up. Okay, there we go. That is hex burst. Yeah, so now I have a little hex burst I can eat, and when I look at my stack, as many times as I ate it, it'll be that many into my stack, which is pretty cool. Now this one will take a list of patterns and it will cast it when you eat it. So let's say I want a list of patterns. Like, first I'm going to get my position. I'm going to give it a list of patterns of me getting launched in a direction. Actually, no. Let me do teleport 5 blocks, because I haven't used Blink in a while. Blink is a pretty cool spell. Now, like so, with that I can conjure Hex Dorito. Now I have a Hex Tito, and it will teleport me 5 blocks in that direction. Pretty cool. Yeah, so it's nice and awesome. Yeah, so it's a pretty cool spell. Now, yeah, that's all it has for Hex Delights, but they're pretty cool. Now, this next one is called Conjure Spike. Now, it will conjure a spike at a location you give it at the axis direction you give it. So basically, it has to be a non-air block, like so. And then it won't conjure a line of them. It won't conjure them in direction. It will more conjure them on that side of the block. So let's say I want the top side. So it would be just like so. And then I conjure a hex spike. Oh, I forgot. It also needs a delay, a timed delay. So let's give it 1, just because that's useful. Now let's conjure it. Yeah. It'll start up a little hex spike, which is kind of cool. Now this next part, to my knowledge, should be block mimicry. Block mimicry is pretty cool. Yeah, so this first one is push. I can push a block in a axis direction. So let's say I want to pick this block. And I select it just like I normally would. And just like so. Then I do this to choose the direction. Now I'm going to cast push. And just like so, it pushes it up in that direction as if a piston pushed it. Now, I can also push it back down, because that's a little bit more useful. So let's do down. And then I can push it back down, just like so, with the very same spell. So, it's kind of useful. Now this one is dispense. I can dispense an item at a given location and a given direction. So let's say I want to dispense this item burst. At this location. It doesn't actually have to be a block. And then I want it to go upwards. There we go. Now just like so, then I can cast dispense. And we'll dispense it over there, which is kind of cool. Yeah. And now these are, if you remember Hexical, there was a smelt spell. These are kind of like those smelt spells, or that smelt spell, but instead it's more specific versions. This one is only for the furnace, this one is only for campfire, this one is specifically for smoke, and this one is more specifically for blast. So they're each specialized variant of cooking, which is pretty cool. Now this one is Stone Cutter. Stone Cutter takes an item entity and a identifier, and then we'll cut it to be like that identifier if it is able to be cut, which is pretty cool. Now, these next spells are spell circle spells. And I know some of y'all don't like spell circles, but trust me, come on, these are great. So this one is called Displace. It is kind of like Rare Teleport, but it can only be used on a spell circle within the spell circle, but instead of taking distance coordinates, it takes world coordinates, allowing you to literally just give a position of world coordinates and just teleport there. It's pretty cool. And I believe it's also a little bit cheaper as well. Now, these next two are also kind of good. You have this one, which has to deal with the pedestal. It'll basically make a vector. If a pedestal is at that location, it'll treat that pedestal as its offhand or its wrist pocket, which is pretty nice. But like I said, I can't show that because the pedestal is broken for me and it crashes my game. But yeah, now we have export media. It'll take a vector and then a number of media and export that much amethyst dust out at that location, which is pretty cool. Now these next spells have to do with evocation. So basically evoking basically allows you to hold R or a different key if you set it to a different key, and essentially you can cast a hex that you've etched into yourself to just cast it just by holding R, at least in my case. So basically, let's say I want to launch up into the sky. Or, nah, let's teleport 10 blocks, because teleporting is a little bit more fun. And then I do blink, and like so. Then I have to do this like so. And then like that. Then I have, wait, so if I hold R, and it'll continue to cast for me as long as I'm holding the key. It'll cast about like every second or so, which is pretty cool. Now, I also have two which will then basically act as one to get the list of patterns, and then one which will then tell me how long I've been evoking, which actually gives me an idea. I could actually make a list where it takes me and then how long I've been evoking for. Let me go over it so I know how to write it, and how long I've been evoking for. And then blink that distance and close it, and then actually evoke it into myself. And just like so, if I hold R, it becomes out of my range too quickly. Yeah, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's a nice little spell. Now, this next one has to deal with hoppers. It basically can give you a source location and a destination, and then, well, just, it'll take items from that source and then put it to that destination. Now, the numbers are there to say how much do you want. I don't think they have to be there though, but there's also hopper purification, which can give you a list of how, like, what items are at that source if it supports a inventory. Yeah. Now, a source could be a chest or even a location that a item happens to be at, or an entity like an armor stand, mine cart with a chest, a hopper. Could be anything of the sort that can support a inventory or has blocks with or items within it. So, yeah. And the same thing goes for destinations as well, which is pretty cool. Now, this next one basically is hotbar. You can get which number hotbar you're on, just like so. And I'm pretty sure it also starts from 0. So if I do this, it should be 0. Yep. And if I say, hey, what if I do number 4, which should be right to 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it should be right here. And then I cast this called switch. It switches me to that key. Or not that key, but that hotbar, which is pretty cool. Now these next ones, either y'all will love or hate. They're called lesser sentinels. Now, you know how normally sentinels are bound to only one location and only that one location until you give them a new location. Lesser sentinels are not the same, but they're also more simplistic. So let's say I want to basically, so let's say I start off with an empty list. Then I create a little spell. That'll get my head location, then put it into that empty list, and then it will recreate the spell. Actually, I'm not even going to do it. I'm going to show you another way to make a spell repeat. Actually, no, I can't do it in this case. Never mind. Essentially, now I'm going to do the normal way, because the other way that I was going to show you doesn't work. How sad. And then I duplicate it, just so I can then copy it down into my Raven Mind. So let's start off with this location. Now let's go over to this location. This location. This location. And somewhere in the middle. Because 5 doesn't seem too bad. Now, using that, I can get rid of that top one. And then deploy lesser sentinels. Which are actually 2D. You could go around them all you want, but they're gonna stay the same from all angles. They're all just a flat hexagon, but you can see there's multiple of them, which is very cool. And if I get rid of it and then cast the other spell, it gives me all their locations, which is pretty useful. But now you may notice there's no spell to get rid of them. When I first tried messing with them, I couldn't figure out how to get rid of them. There's no dedicated spell to do so. Essentially what you have to do is make an empty list and then cast deploy sentinels. And it'll give them to no place. Thus, they're all gone. Now, this should be the last set of patterns except for one, which I'm not even gonna dare right now to show you much what it does. But essentially, these are shaders. Now, this first one does nothing when you do it because it is called clear vision. It clears your vision back to normal. Now, this one basically gives you night vision in a way, but it doesn't give you an effect. It changes how you see the world, and it brightens stuff up drastically. Yeah, so it gets insanely bright. When I mean insanely bright, I mean insanely bright. Now, if you're in a cave, it works perfectly fine. Perfectly so. But stuff like your inventory is bright. But if you want to clear it, you just draw like normal. And then it's back to being dark. So, yeah. And that's what that one does. Now, you also have versional. Basically, each one does its own kind of thing. Now, this one, I don't remember what it does. So this one just makes stuff into line art. I actually kind of like it. It kind of looks cool in a way, but also it's a little difficult to get the hang of. And then this one basically changes your vision to broadcast, I believe. Or not broadcast, but yeah, it makes it look like an old screen. And also, they can't really be overlapped with each other to my knowledge. So, yeah. This one will highlight anything that's purple, just because amethyst is highly important. You kind of want to notice it when you see it. So it highlights purple things. It highlights important things. Purple, like amethyst. Shulkers are somewhat important too, but yeah, it just highlights purple, because purple is something that you usually should be interested in. Yeah, so it's kind of useful, especially when you go over to this page and you see a lot of purple. It makes you realize how little usual Minecraft shows purple. And then this one is, wow, a doozy. So basically, this one will give you spider vision, which is harder to make than it usually looks. So yeah, see, so it gives you this normal spider vision. Now, if I try to cast, you'll see the lower crosshair, it doesn't line up with that. Your mouse will be offset, which makes it hard to know how to cast. So what I'm going to do is just try to cast. It's a little difficult to control, but it can be done. Now, that's all for the normal spells except this one. Horrible is, oh my goodness. It's the biggest pattern I've ever seen. It is insanely hard to create. So, just want to tell you, you probably don't want to do it much. But essentially what horrible does is it takes a vector and then spawns a cake at that location. Just to put it out there, it spawns a cake and also puts a entity into your stack. That entity I don't remember. All I remember is it summons a cake. The cake is a lie. You can't eat the cake. It's one of those jokes. But yeah, if you want in another video, I can actually cast it if you don't believe me that it summons a cake. But yeah, it's a horrible spell. But yeah. So now let's move on to great spells. So great spells for this are, of course, one that I definitely need to show you is Charm. Charm I didn't go over much before because it's a great spell. So this one, the actual main Charm spell, is an actual great spell. In normal hex casting, if you look at it, it'll look like this. It won't show you how to draw it. Mine, it just looks like that. And Charm Gambit and Charm Reflection, as well as Charm Gambit 2, Charm Reflection 2, and Disenchant, or Discharm, all will show you how to draw them, because they're normal patterns. So let's take a Krutos, because the Krutos are what the charm is designed for. It can also be on a spell book or something, or even a artifact if you want. But essentially, if I give it a entity, which I believe should be the charm in this case. So the entity, the charm, and then I give it a list, what's going to cast. Let's just say break block. So break block, because break block is one of the simplest spells. There we go. And just like so, bam. And now it's going to take a number. That's how much media it's going to have. Let's just give it 100, because 100 is a good number. Now we're going to give it two lists of numbers. One for standing, one for basically crouching. So basically 0 and 1 are basic for attacking and using respectively. So we're going to make it when we're standing. If we try to attack, it will instead just make us use the item. So let's put number 0 and put it in. Now let's make another empty list and take number 1 for using and put it in. Just like so. There we go. That is our spell. Now we're going to charm it. And charming, in mine at least, looks like this. And when it's done, it'll do that. And now you'll see a red line, it's been charmed. And also if you crack the Krutos before you charm it, it will actually show you what's in it, which is pretty good. But now if I'm standing and I try to break something, it'll cast a spell. If I try to use it though, you can see I'm trying to use it, it won't. AKA right click, I'm hitting right click, it won't. If I do left click, because I set it to 0, it's going to do that. Now if I crouch and do left click, it'll do normal break. But now if I right click, it will actually use the spell. Yeah, so 0 and 1 respectively are for attacking / breaking and using respectively. Now there's also supposed to be other numbers, I believe. Yeah, up to 7. Yeah, which is pretty cool. I haven't checked out the other numbers, so feel free to check out those numbers. But yeah, and Charm Gambit basically will take you'll basically take a new IOT and put it into the internal storage of the charm itself. And yeah, and then this one will just give you what's in the charm. So essentially, wait. So this will give me what's in the charm. Oh. So that has to be done by the charm spell itself. Huh. Yeah, it's a nice little thing. But then you have these two, which will basically act as it will basically put in or take out the IOT if the item normally, before being charmed, can hold an IOT, just like a focus. Now this one will, of course, discharm the item. So let's put it onto the ground and discharm it. Just because I don't really need it to be charmed right now. And then just like so, I have it in my stack, and now I can discharm it. Discharm. Huh. The funny thing is, I didn't know it would straight up get rid of the item. Yeah, so it looks like that it will get rid of the item depending on what it is. Now, there are a couple of them which have unique, special variations on what they'll do if they are charmed. I'm talking about the Krutos. Depending on what the Krutos is, its effect can be different. So the Bismuth Krutos doesn't have any special effect. The Clover Krutos doesn't either. But the compass does. If a vector has been left on top of the stack, it will then point towards that point, thus making it easier to go back to it. So it's pretty cool. And then you also have the Flute Krutos, which will, if a number has been left on top of the stack, play that note. Yeah. And Handbell is supposed to summon a entity, I believe. I may be wrong. I haven't tested it out, but it says it'll summon a helper, which is quite cool. Yeah. And there isn't really much else. These two, the up Krutos and the down Krutos, it says are usually to express satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So, yeah, that's all there is really about the Krutos. They're cool. Some of them have special effects. Some of them don't. But, yeah. Now, moving on to the next great spell, Greater Blink. Now, you may realize, oh, hey, it's just like Greater Teleport. There's a thing about Greater Teleport I didn't know about. Every time you use Greater Teleport, it has a chance to throw out your items. So, yeah, be careful about using Greater Teleport because it can just throw out an item randomly. But unlike Greater Teleport, Greater Blink doesn't have that issue, but it's limited to 128 blocks. But also, its calculations can be erratic, as it says. Yeah. So, the target is exclusively yourself, the caster, and it takes in a vector. Now, the vector, its calculations are a little odd in a way. So, essentially, it works off of the way you're facing. So the three numbers basically each have their own meaning. So the first number out of the vector is like left and right. I'm pretty sure positive will take you left, and yeah. Oh no, so positive will take you going right, and negative will take you going left. And then obviously up and down will be up and down, but from the top of your head, which means if I'm facing this way, it will teleport me up one block backwards in this direction instead of just one block in total. And the final one will be forward and backwards. So let's say I want to teleport one block forward, so I have to do Z, and then let's actually change it to 5. No, 5. There we go. And just like so, bam. And then I use greater teleport, which looks, in my world, something like so. And then bam. Oh, I did that wrong. And then bam, I have greater teleport. And with that, or not greater teleport, but greater blink, it'll teleport me in that direction. Now, if I want to teleport multiple blocks up, let's say 10, and multiply. Now, like I said, if I face this way, it'll teleport me backwards. So if I do greater blink right now, it will do that. You can see I've teleported backwards in the direction that my head was facing upwards. So yeah, you can teleport yourself according to which direction you're looking, which can be kinda useful. So yeah. And now this one is called mesh. Mesh is actually similar to specs in a way, but it's also different because unlike specs, it doesn't off the bat show something. Like, for example, it takes in a vector and then gives me the entity, the mesh entity. So let's just give it my head position. And now if I cast, let me also double check that was okay. And now if I cast mesh, it will look something like, not, oh, I cast that wrong. Okay, there we go. Now I'm drawing it correctly. There we go, contour mesh. Now I have a mesh in my inventory. Now what I'm going to do is copy it because I don't want to lose it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some pattern manipulation and create a pattern. Just because this is simple. If I could remember how to draw that. Hold on. Sometimes you have to go back to pattern manipulation. That's what it is. I was drawing it backwards. Wait, no. That's not the right one. It was this I was looking for. At least I believe so. Yep. Okay, there we go. Now give me a list of positions. Now, using this, which is called weave, I can weave the mesh into that shape. Because it takes a list of positions and then will weave the mesh into that shape. And the mesh will look just like so. Don't mind this guy. This guy is from a boss mod I have. But essentially, it'll turn the mesh into that shape, which is pretty cool. And also, if I want to make it bigger, I could just duplicate the mesh entity because I don't want to lose it, and then draw out a pattern like so, which should look like this, and it gives me all of its positions. And now I'm going to do a little thing where I create a little spell And I want to make it twice as big. Now I'm going to duplicate, then close up, rotate around, Thoth's Gambit, and then I am going to weave mesh. Oh no. You can see a mistake was made. Ah, Lord. You know, when that happens, it sucks. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the mesh again. I should be looking at the mesh. Yep, I'm looking at the mesh. Good. And now I'm going to get the mesh back into my stack. And then I'm going to get its stuff. And then I'm going to make a new list. Take number. Duplicate it by that. Rotate around. Thoth's Gambit. Because that's effective. And then what I'm going to do is basically get the mesh again. And then rotate the 2. Or just or gambit the 2. And then remesh it. And then it's bigger now. Yeah. You just give it a list of locations and it can do stuff. And if you want to make a manual location, something like so, because if you remember that little version of the Hermes Gambit, but it was with a square pattern, like if I go back to items and plushies, if you remember this one should be easy to make. So essentially all I have to do is start off with plus y, and then plus, let's check which way is x. X is that way, okay. And plus x, add the 2, then do a plus x. Okay, and then do a 0, because then we're going to the center. Then we're going up. At least I believe we are. Yep, we're going up. Then we're going to negative x. And then I can go to duplicate it, and then do negative y, and then add the 2, and I should be able to just do negative y on its own, and then that should be 7. Yep, 7. So then I can draw a 7, then Thoth's Gambit it, and then I can do this. And then it failed. Lol, it failed. Yeah, I messed up. But yeah, you can draw patterns by hand, and you're not even stuck to 2D patterns. If I want to do something like, per se, I want to first select the mesh, because that's the center. And then I want to do something like get it to be a cube. Let's make a cube, because a cube is easy. So first I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to do x, and then z. Then I have to add them. Okay. Now I'm going to make it so it goes to negative x, and then times it by 2. Times it by 2. And with it like that, I can then rotate, because I forgot to duplicate it. Then I need to do add the two. It's going to take a little bit, so you can skip forward if you want. Okay, so I'm going to do not positive Z. First I have to duplicate. I almost forgot to do that again. So now I'm going to do is negative Z times by 2, of course. Add it. Now I'm going to basically have to think about it, because yeah, let's just make a square up above it because it's more simple. Yep. And now it should just be duplicate, then positive x times by 2, add it, and then mesh it. You can see that I kind of messed up. I kind of didn't do it right. Oh, nothing that I can't fix. So I need to basically duplicate, then negative x times 2 multiply, add, rotate. Now I need to do number 4, then put it all together. And as you can guess, I'm running out of room. So now I actually need to use my little potion, again, potion of clarity, because I need more room. And then just like so, I can weave the mesh properly, and you can see I forgot to connect it. But yeah, it does some cool things. It is really cool. And also, just like normal specs, you can also use the same spells to get rid of them. So let's say I want to get rid of it. I can just use dispel spec. So just dispel spec. And it works because it's just a evolved form of spec. Now, unlike spec, you can't just use alter spec. Alter spec does not work. It won't work like that. That will actively ruin your day. Don't do that. But yeah, that's everything I have to go over about Hexical. So, that's all I want to say. Have a great and lovely day.